Ladies and gentlemen, this is the day you join Toastmasters for. For today, we refight the American Civil War, and you will tell your children's children about this speech today. When we discuss the American Civil War, we're really discussing one area and one army, and that's the Eastern Theater, Virginia, and the Army of Northern Virginia. In the West, in the Deep South, the Confederacy had almost always a string of defeats. Minor setbacks for the Union, but their victories were always assured. Now, what caused this? Let's begin with the year 1862. McClellan had actually, in the Peninsula Campaign, had driven to within 20 miles of Richmond. If Richmond fell, the war was over. It was done. It was kaput. This was early 1862. But then something happened. General Johnson, the Confederate commander, was wounded. And in his place was placed a staff officer who had not seen command field experience for many years, and that was Robert E. Lee. Within days, he had reorganized his army. He demanded of his subordinates two things. One, that they lead from the front, and two, that they were aggressive. If he discussed with one of his commanders, and the commander said, well, I was waiting for your orders to attack, that man was relieved. The second thing he did, he reorganized his army into two wings. Within weeks of taking command, he had driven north. He had driven, beginning at the Battle of Seven Pines, he had driven the Union forces out of Virginia, and by late summer, early autumn, he was already into Maryland. There he fought at the Battle of Antietam, a draw with the Union forces. And so that concluded 1862, the year 1862, which was almost surely a defeat for the Confederacy, if not for this new commander who came upon the scene. 1863 began for the Confederacy with much danger and also much hope. General Burnside, with a much larger Union army, was crossing the Rappahannock at Fredericksburg to capture Richmond. General Lee, with a dug-in force, defeated and stopped Burnside's attack. Then General Lee, rather than remain on the defensive, he began an attack northward. At Chancellorsville, even though he had a force he was facing a force that was twice his size, he split his much smaller force. As I mentioned earlier, he had two wings. Well, he sent one wing to attack the Union flank, and this, to my knowledge, had not been done before, to split your army in the face of a superior force. And he actually drove the Union army from the field. And he continued this string of victories in 1863 all the way into Pennsylvania, where at Gettysburg he lost. And one of the drawbacks of his policy of having his commanders lead from the front was that they were being killed. He lost Thomas Stonewall Jackson at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Probably 60 to 70% of his division commanders had been killed or grievously wounded. So there were a lot of reasons why he lost at Gettysburg, but these contributed, and it was his command policy. So after Gettysburg, there were a series of battles, and again, he usually won these battles, but the problem was of attrition. Each battle he won, he could not replace the fighting men he had, where the North could. Finally, the war ended in 1865 at the siege of Richmond, which it was actually a siege of Petersburg, but once Petersburg fell, Richmond would fall. So that siege lasted 1864, early 1869. I believe it lasted approximately 9 months. Then, when they could no longer hold Robert E. Lee again made an aggressive move. He did not surrender, or initially he did not surrender. He actually broke out. He announced to the presidency of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, that he could no longer hold the line. He took his army out of the line and marched it southwest to link up with Johnson's army and to continue military operations in southern Virginia and the Carolinas. However, he was intercepted by General Grant. His forces, which at one time had totaled maybe 200,000 men, were down to 13,000, and he was forced to surrender. But he made the decision also that him and his officers would not conduct guerrilla operations against the United States. He felt that would have been an immoral type of operations. Now, so was he an effective commander? I would say yes, based on the history and what had happened. He was the only officer in the Confederacy that showed victory after victory. And I'm talking senior field commander type officers. Did his aggressive style lead to the loss of manpower, where some of his critics had said if he was less aggressive, he could have maintained that manpower, been on the defensive, and eventually the North would have tired of the war? Well, no, he knew exactly what he was doing. The North outnumbered the South 4 to 5 times the population. The population of the South was 8 to 9 million, but a quarter of those were slaves. So he had no choice. The longer the war went on, the more men, materials, and technology the Union could bring to bear, and the less likely of a favorable outcome for the Confederacy. So I believe in studying this man that he was effective and he was right. So in conclusion, thank you for your time, Mr. Toastmaster.